this is Janaki from Catamancy Tarot. This time I'm without my cat because I am in India. I know it's been a while since my last video. I've been here for about a month and a half now. I know that's a long time to leave you guys hanging, but I've had a really kind of tumultuous start to my fieldwork here. I think anytime you start fieldwork, it always takes you about a month to go through the adjustment period of like the 12-hour time change and just getting into the swing of things. And I've actually had a couple huge obstacles that I've had to face since I've gotten here that weren't really anticipated. And so I wanted to make a video guide for you guys a lot sooner to give you some updates, but I've just been it hasn't happened. And so I figured now that we're, going from Cancer season into Leo season, it's a good time for me to get back out there and say hello and give you guys an update. It's been a little bit of a ride. As some of you who have watched my previous videos may have known, my last time here was during the pandemic, and I got stuck here for a couple months, and I had some experiences that were a little bit caused some trauma. I think we all went through some of that with the pandemic, and so I've actually found that being back for the first time in a while has been unexpectedly healing in some really great ways. I feel I've also felt a lot of affirmations that I'm exactly where I need to be and I'm on the right path, which has been great. But as I mentioned, so as soon as I got to Mumbai, the first weekend, it happened to be my 30th birthday, and I had actually scheduled an interview and a reading with a local reader that I was excited about. And as soon as you sit down for a reading with a Indian tarot reader, the first thing they ask you is your birth date, because they calculate your numerology and they sort of go from there. And so she immediately found out it was my birthday, and she was so sweet and welcoming that she actually invited me to come stay with her for a few days because she didn't want me to be alone. So I was feeling really overwhelmed with gratitude for that, and I ended up taking her up on that offer. And I went and stayed with her in her home, which is a few hours outside of Mumbai, actually. And I ended up, she took me around. I'll show you a clip right here. She took me to a nearby Krishna temple when she heard about my upbringing, and so she took me to a temple. After that, I don't know how many of you are experienced with Indian food, and especially Indian street food, but there's this thing called pani puri, which is basically it's a fried ball of dough, but it's very crispy, and so you poke a hole in it with your thumb and you fill it with really spicy water and some tamarind and some other goodies, and then you bite into it and it's just an explosion. And they're really fun, but they're also very well known for getting foreigners very ill. And so I had this experience where she had it prepared at home, so I thought I was in the clear. I was not in the clear, and I got extremely ill, and I couldn't leave her house for a few days, which was one of those experiences where you just have to throw your hands up and just go with the flow. So I was very grateful for the care I received, and luckily I had brought along some decks with me to give away to readers here as gifts. So I was able to do that for her, but then she immediately gifted me something back, and I'll show you guys what it was in a second. I'm going to do a little show and tell at the end here, so just stick around for that if that's something you want to see. But Yeah, it was like a big, that's not how I expected to start. So I was ill for almost a week, and then I got back here and I had some, back to my place where I'm staying, and I had like a relapse of the stomach trouble. So I was feeling really ill for about 2 weeks, and in the middle of feeling ill, I also had almost every other thing go wrong, that could go wrong. My new Indian SIM card completely broke, so I was out without phone service, like ill, alone in a new city, which wasn't fun. I got it fixed. And then like it's monsoon season here, and so the rains happened, and then there's no Wi-Fi or power, and you're just like, oh, I can't do anything, and feeling a little immobilized. And then I'm, and then the next thing, like my American bank card isn't working, and I'm on a research fellowship right now, and they still haven't given me my fellowship, and I've been here a month and a half, and I'm still waiting to get my funds come through, because the way they dole it out is they get you an Indian bank account with a card, but Indian bureaucracy takes time, and so I've been kind of like really just having to figure things out. And then the other day, like my laptop charger fritzed out and died, and so I'm having all of these like one after the other type of obstacles. So, and it was just cancer season. I'm a huge cancer stellium, so I was very much feeling at times this need to just kind of like nest. And when you're doing field work, the goal is to like go out into the world and get to know people and make connections. And so I was sort of battling this illness and this like instinct to really kind of close in and sort of do this self-protect thing. So that's how I've been. I haven't been watching as many videos. I've seen some people do some like really fun tags that I'm excited to do when I get back. I miss you all. It's hard for me to watch too many videos though, because like I see everyone's decks, and then I miss my decks, and I miss my cat, and anyways, it'll be okay. But I just wanted to touch base with you guys about some of the things that I have been able to find. So far I've done about maybe about a dozen interviews, a little less than that, with about half a dozen people. So with some folks I've been able to meet a couple times, and so I'm really hoping to continue to develop some of those relationships. And I just wanted to check in with you guys and share some of my findings. Overall, the readers I've met here have been like extraordinarily welcoming and generous and kind. And anytime I've been to India, I've by and large been met with this overwhelming hospitality. And so I'm feeling incredibly grateful for that. So some of the things that I've noticed are big themes, or themes I want to explore more here, is by and large when readers are doing readings for people here, what they all seem to agree what the cards are telling people is tarot is a tool to read and understand one's karma. And so karma is a term that you're all probably very familiar with. But for these readers, it means looking at the cards and looking and seeing what's going on in people's lives that they've sort of come into this life with, karmic things from their past life that have built up, or, negotiate relationships in this life so they won't, continue certain karmas into the future. So that's something that I've thought was quite interesting, that everyone seems to think that the thing that tarot allows you to read is when you're doing a reading, you're really reading someone's karma. And along with that, you can I've met a couple readers who are using tarot in a really interesting way, because they're using tarot as a diagnostic tool to give very traditional remedies. And I'll show you one of the things I want to do a show and tell about has to do with this thing. So I'll explain more in a little bit. But so in India, with things like astrology, you have very specific remedies according to the planetary influences in your chart. And so some of these remedies might include, saying certain mantras to, strengthen a weak planet, or giving offerings to a certain planetary deity, or wearing certain colors on certain days, a lot of gems. So there's a lot of very sort of traditional remedies. And so a lot of readers are just using tarot as a way to, let me get that doorbell. Sorry for the interruption there. That was actually my checkbooks just came, so now I can write Indian checks to people, but I still don't have my bank card. Anyways, yeah, so a lot of the readers are using, incorporating tarot into sort of traditional remedies, which I have found really interesting. And one of the biggest, the current biggest trend, I would say, spiritually in India right now is something called vastu. Some of you may have heard of it. It's kind of like the Indian feng shui, but it's all about thinking about your home as sort of this microcosm for the universe. And it's a system where the home is, you find the center point of the home, which is called the Brahmastan, or the, that's the central point of Brahma, the creator. And from there you divide the home into 16 quadrants. So you have, the cardinal directions, and then you have the corners, and then you further subdivide it. And so you get these very specific slices of home, which are supposed to, in each quadrant is associated with different aspects of family life. And so a lot of problems that come up in people's lives, people can pinpoint the problems, if you rearrange your home, if you turn your bed around, if you get rid of the trash can in that corner of the house and move it to a more appropriate corner, these kinds of things. And so right now, India is experiencing a lot of urban growth, and so a lot of, you're also seeing sort of the growth of an Indian middle class. And so it's very popular with these demographics that are getting into real estate. And so even like big real estate developers are having to like consult vastu shastra consultants in order to turn a profit. Otherwise people won't buy homes if they're not built according to vastu, which is all really interesting. And so it's interesting to see how tarot is being incorporated into a system like that. And lastly, one of the things I've been kind of really exploring are some of the gender dynamics that are going on. So predominantly, most of the readers in India are female, and this is a shift from, tarot clients are asking tarot readers, the questions they're asking are by and large the same set of questions. They would usually traditionally consult an astrologer or a jyotish, and so it's this sort of same set of questions around, marriage compatibility is a big one, or any kind of relationship. Seeing if, problems around like the parents not approving a match, or, setting right dates, finding good dates to start a job, or to like, schedule a marriage, or like career shifts. All of these are usual points in life where people would traditionally go to an astrologer, but I'm interested in understanding why they're now turning more and more to tarot readers. And it seems like tarot is still sort of gaining popularity here, and one of the ways that it's become popular is that there's a lot of tarot readers who give sort of daily draws on news channels alongside astrologers who give like horoscopes. So this has been going on for quite some time. Some of the women I've interviewed have actually worked on television and in the news for several years. And so this is one of the ways that tarot has steadily been gaining popularity. And likewise, I think in the US and really the rest of the world, during the pandemic, the tarot industry kind of really boomed. And so you're also seeing like a new generation of readers pop up more recently, and younger readers who are in their 30s, which I think is interesting because I think that's fairly similar, a similar pattern, just sort of all over the place, which is really interesting. So that's some of the things I've been exploring. Let me see, is there anything else I want to tell you? I made some bullet points. Yeah, the last thing is, and I think those of you who have, like, in the comments of my last video, some of your impressions of Indian tarot readers have just been, it's very focused on fortune telling, and people seem to think that there's a sort of like a very brusque bedside manner. I don't know how else to say that you get, you know, people not being afraid to say like, you're gonna die on this day. And so some of that is present, and some of that I think is not quite so. And one of the things that I've heard from some of the people I've been talking to is that actually the shift from male astrologers to female readers has been a push against the sort of traditional astrologer manner, which is very brusque. It's very prescriptive. You know, this is what's happening. This is what you do. Like, that's, you know. And so some of the readers I've talking to have felt like the shift to seeing female readers as a shift to going to people who actually listen to their problems more and can give a more sort of empathetic understanding and conversation, and more of a dialogue, perhaps. So I thought that was an interesting shift that I found. But by and large, I would say there is Indian readers are very proud because they feel like their style of doing readings is the most accurate. And so there is this like huge emphasis in accuracy in predictive readings. And that is sort of what's valued in teaching and learning. And so, and I've heard some Indian tarot readers sort of critique what they've seen of Western readers because it's not as accurate. So I thought that was also really interesting, and that's something I'm exploring. And I mean, just around predictive readings in general, I think that it feels like they get a little bit of a bad rap because of this emphasis on prediction and accuracy and things like that. But yeah, in India, that's the paradigm that people are operating in. So those are some of my current big findings I thought I would share with you guys. And so for the rest of the video, I'm gonna do a little bit of a show and tell. So while I was like very ill and stayed at home for a couple weeks, what I ended up doing is some Amazon shopping. And I purchased a number of decks and books that are only available in India, so sort of decks made by Indians for Indians that I couldn't find or get a hold of in the US. And so a couple of them ended up being really interesting, and so yeah, let me show you some of the things I've been playing around with. Alrighty, So as you can see, the place I'm staying came with its own crystal ball and crystals around, and so I felt very welcome. And so I figured they'd join us for our readings, or our video today. So the first thing I wanted to show you was when I stayed with the reader I met on my birthday. She gave me a gift, and it came in this bag, which is super sweet. And this is a deck that I normally would never purchase for myself, but they are extremely popular in India. And so I received Doreen Virtue's Angel Therapy Oracle cards. So if I was not gifted this, I would never normally go for anything Doreen Virtue. But an interesting thing to note is that Doreen Virtue and like all of her decks are extremely, extremely popular in India. And part of that is because that's what's available. And so in India, they don't have the same kind of access to like a variety of decks as there is in the West. And so what's available is what people use. And so by and large, what people are using are the Rider-Waite-Smith deck pretty much exclusively. And there are some variations of the Rider-Waite-Smith, but affordable mass market decks that aren't RWS aren't really widely available in India. So people can get a hold of them, but they can be quite expensive, and it's sort of very out of the way for readers to actually get a hold of. And so aside from the Rider-Waite-Smith, what's available are angel cards. And in India, oracle cards are so synonymous with Doreen Virtue's line of decks that pretty much all oracle decks are just called angel cards. And so people do, angel therapy, people do angel messages, people do angel healings here. And so it's really become like a whole thing on its own, and part of because of the popularity of these kinds of mass market decks and how sort of saturated India is with them. So that's something I thought was very interesting. And so while, even though I wouldn't normally go for something like this, because it's a gift and because it's sort of part of what's going on here, I'm actually very happy to have come into this deck through this way. It was a very generous gift as well, because as you guys know, Doreen Virtue had her whole thing where she's not making decks anymore, and so some of these decks are actually becoming harder and harder to find. So that was a very kind gift. I was a little bit like, she had welcomed me into her home. I had given her a gift, and then she immediately gave me a gift back, and I was like, oh, I can't keep up with this one-upsmanship. And she one-upped me even further. So she and a few other of the readers I've talked to have actually developed their own line of oracle decks, feeling frustrated that there wasn't enough oracle decks with other kinds of messages. So this reader who I had worked with, she had created, I believe, like 6 different oracle decks, all just, on her own. And each of the decks was according to some theme. So she would do 78 cards and going through the tarot deck. But one oracle deck would be like, having to do with finance or having to do with romance or any of these like big topics. And so she would just go through, and for each of the cards of the tarot, she would just write out a guiding message for finance for each of the 78 cards. And then there would be sort of no artwork, it would just be text, and this is the back image that she would use on all of them. Divine guidance here. And so she gifted me, this is a complete mini oracle deck for all of the chakras, which I was very happy to receive. I don't have any other chakra-oriented decks, and so this is a great one just to have for reference, or I can imagine using these for like meditation or for altar work. So I thought this was an extremely, extremely sweet gift and a very kind of one-of-the-kind thing. So I was very grateful and a little bit overwhelmed by that sort of initial experience I had. So once I got home from her place and I got ill again, that's when I started my my Amazon exploration, and so I found 3 decks and a couple books. So I will show you the first deck that I got. This is called the Indian Folklore Tarot by Dr. Ruchi Rastogi. So this is a bilingual deck in Hindi and in English. And so I was excited about this deck because it goes through and it's an Indian, specifically like a Hindu take on the tarot archetypes. And so I was very excited to go through and see what she's done with them. And so you can see for each of them, there's going to be a character from an Indian folklore tale. And so an interesting thing to note about this deck in comparison to, for example, some of you may be more familiar with the Sacred Indian Tarot. This deck is working with some of like the major epics and some of the major deities, ones that I think a lot of Westerners would be more familiar with. But this deck is really drawing on like folklore stories, so stories that a lot of Indians just grow up with, but that are less known to the West. For example, like I don't know what the story is with this woodcutter here, and unfortunately, if I go into the guidebook here, and so if we look for the readings for the Fool, it actually never states, it starts with some keywords which are just like beginnings, like a lot of the main meanings you would come to expect for the Fool. But it doesn't actually mention anywhere in the guidebook what who it is depicted in the images. And I think some other reviewers of this deck on Amazon have also pointed this out. And so I believe she might be working on like a full book that would accompany this deck. But luckily she also includes her like contact information on the back of the box. So I'm going to be trying to get in touch and hearing a little bit more about this deck. But I'll go ahead and just flip through I'll go through the major arcana. So here we have Durga here with the moon cycle, and so some of you may be familiar with the festival of Navratri, or which is a period of 9 nights, which goes through part of the lunar cycle. And so here we have her as our high priestess. We have the Empress here. I believe this is the story of this is the mother of the Buddha who has a dream of a white elephant with a lotus while she's pregnant. We have an emperor here who looks like he just received some bad news. I don't know who this figure is. My knowledge is a little patchy through some of this. Here we have the Hierophant. The Lovers. If anyone knows what scene this is, I would love to know. It looks like a an ascetic is having a visitation from some kind of celestial being, but I don't know the story for this one, and I'm very curious about it. Here we have Arjuna in the chariot. This one I do know. This is a historical tale. This is Rani of Jhansi. So she's a historical figure of a woman who took up arms. So it's a very famous folklore type of folk hero for strength. We have the hermit. We have the Wheel of Fortune here. So you've got Jupiter and a bunch of other planets. So it's really this, in Hindi it's Bhagya Chakra. So it's pretty literal. Chakra is, wheel, or, it's the same root for chakra. And Bhagya is fortune. Here we have Justice, the Hanged Man. Death. This again looks like a very specific story that I wish I could read more about. We have the Buddha with temperance. We have the devil who's about to kill this child. The Tower. This might be the burning of Lanka. I could be wrong though. The Star. The Moon. So this is probably Chandra Ma. So that's moon deity. And here we have the sun. Suraj, which is another deity. And for judgment we get, this is a sort of like very famous image of Krishna and Arjuna at the Battle of Kurukshetra during this is the setting for the Bhagavad Gita. And then you have the world, which is, you have all of these different manifestations of Vishnu being revealed. And then if we want to take a quick look at the different suits, so we've got wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. So it's all very traditional. And so, let's take a quick look at the pentacles here. So it's Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, but just different types of scenes. One of the things in the comments I thought was very interesting with this one. So all of the coins have the goddess Lakshmi on it, and people were upset about this because he's actually placing his feet on the goddess Lakshmi, which is enormously disrespectful and you wouldn't do. And so even though that's what the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, I geek out about details like this. This is kind of my jam, so forgive me if this is boring or more than you kind of bargained for here. Some of these scenes are really quite lovely. And then she has her own, it seems, attributions for the court cards with astrology. Great, so that was the Indian folklore tarot. So if you are someone of South Asian descent, and this is something that's interesting to you, you can find it on Indian Amazon and Flipkart also, I believe. The next one I want to show you guys is like peak sort of pop culture, or not pop culture, but just like popularism. It's called Ancient Indian Tarot Cards, and there is no images of this deck anywhere. It looks very sort of thrown together, and that's because one man sort of put this together during the pandemic. This is the this is the deck of cards, and it comes with a whole book. So he wrote an entire book during the pandemic, and I am absolutely fascinated by this. It's a really rich source of, there's a lot of good stuff for me to work with here. The author, which is Dr. Ishwarbhai Joshi, PhD. Let me read the back of the cards, which will give you an understanding of kind of what's going on. So he says, that was the pandemic corona era. Sun was shining with maximum heat explosion. It was a public curfew. Dead silence was in the atmosphere. I was in my library cum consulting room on the ground floor, just going through Zend Avesta, the Zoroastrian sacred script, after finishing Gurbani, the sacred script. Someone was at my main door. I rushed to the door. I was able to see 4 hermits with long beards and long hair. I welcomed them. They were from Bhugu Rishi Ashram. They were carrying some 6000 BC Tadpatra with them, a tool for Nadi Shastra, a branch of astrology. After a while, the mystery began. They asked me for tarot card deck. I was shocked to see the resemblance between the modern tarot card and the ancient Indian cards by Bhugu Rishi. They told me I am the chosen one to do the research and take out the truth in front of the world. Ancient Indian tarot cards is a powerful tool to help people. So that little story is fascinating to me for a number of reasons. As an anthropologist, it's interesting to me because it lays out basically a competing origin story for where the wisdom of tarot cards originally come from. And there's a lot of myths around the origin of tarot. And as an anthropologist, I'm not someone who's going out and trying to prove everybody wrong and like trying to show, the truth and like, some academic perspectives might seek to do that. But what I'm interested in are sort of some of these competing narratives and what's actually at stake for different authors in making these claims about authenticity. So this author went on to say in his book, it's wild. So basically all of these rishis come to his home. They show him these cards that are basically what he identifies as what the original tarot looks like. And in his book, he goes through card by card and he talks about how the Western Rider-Waite-Smith tarot, how all of those images are actually misrepresentations or misunderstandings or like confusion or just corrupted versions of what the original Vedic images looked like, which is fascinating and also kind of hilarious. Just the way he uses extremely dismissive language, like, this card is a complete confusion, and sort of stuff like that, which I find it really fascinating. So he was very specific that the cards' original dimensions were like this. This is the backs of the cards, and this is the fronts. So they're bookmark, but they're sideways bookmark. And he's actually gone ahead and put upright and reverse meanings along with a yes or no and his website on every card, which is tarotideasunlimited.net, ideas with a Z, if you're interested. So the images he's chosen are really quite fascinating. So here for the Fool, you have Narada Muni. And so all of these images are kind of his own CGI. And something about it is like very charming to me. And so for each of the cards he goes through in the book, he talks about stories around the images, along with like why the Western version is wrong, and then what you can learn from each of these cards kind of thing. And he also, he has he's sort of, in order to use the tarot, there's like very specific guidelines that are all coming out of sort of Vedic culture. So, and a lot of sort of keeping Brahminical norms, and there's even, you know, taboos about women not using cards during menstruation and stuff like that, which wouldn't go across well to a Western audience. But I'm really interested in the way Hinduism has a way of historically, it's any sort of culture Hinduism has encountered, it has a way of sort of incorporating different things. And so this is one example of a way a contemporary Indian has sort of incorporated tarot into this sort of Hindu narrative. That, you know, tarot is a powerful tool because it originated with the Vedas, right? So I find that really interesting. I don't know if this book would be particularly useful to people who aren't doing a dissertation about tarot in India. But a lot of the meanings you'll see for these cards are ones that everyone will be familiar with. So here we have Narada Muni. I believe the magician is just Krishna. We have Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge for the high priestess. The empress, we hear this is, I believe this is Lakshmi. The emperor is Ram. You can tell because he has the bow and arrow. We have the sage Valmiki here from the Ramayana. The lovers, Radha and Krishna, very iconic. This is actually, this is a great chariot card, in my opinion. This is on the cover of the Bhagavad Gita. This is, he's taken what's a very iconic image and then imposed it over this sort of celestial stuff, which I think is quite interesting. And there's a lot of, you know, throughout typos and random capitalization, and but this is a self-published thing, and it's all written in sort of Indian English vernacular. Strength, we have Durga, which actually makes a lot of sense. We have the Hermit, the Wheel of Fortune, Justice. So for those of you who don't recognize the iconography, this is Shani, who is the god of Saturn. And Saturn is one of the big malefic planets in Vedic astrology. And so justice is kind of or Saturn can be a little bit of a hard ass, but also, you know, all about justice, and has this chariot pulled by a crow, which is so great. So I thought that was an interesting attribution. We have the Hanged Man, Death, Temperance, the Devil, and here this is Nrsimhadev, sort of eviscerating Hiranyakashipu by hand while his son Prahlad looks on. The Tower, this is the churning of the milk ocean. So on one side you have all the gods, on one side you have all the like rakshas, and you have all of the celestial energies present. So that's a really interesting, it's a whole story. And then afterwards, so this is this is Shiva's head, and this is where the waters of the Ganga originate. This is the moon, and so there's a story in which Ganesh has a fight with the moon, and you also have the dogs and the scorpion present, which I think is quite fun. You have the sun, which again is the Suraj, Surya god. Judgment, this is a really wild judgment card. This is when Krishna steals all of the gopis' clothing as a prank. And then again, you have the world. So this is the incarnation of Vishnu where he reveals all of his many faces. Another thing I wanted to mention that this author sort of rails against in the book is any depictions of nudity in the tarot is like very against traditional Indian normative values, and so he really doesn't like anytime there's nudity in the tarot, which I also find to be quite interesting. And then again with the different suit cards, I won't do a full flip through, but they it's sort of traditional. Some of the traditional sort of imagery just replaced in this same Photoshop-y art style. And he keeps the, for the most part, he keeps the same suits. Sorry, I felt like I talked about that one for a while. I don't know if anyone is still here or around for this. But that was the ancient Indian tarot cards. All right. The next deck I wanted to show you guys is an oracle deck called the Krishna Consciousness Guidance cards. And so this is one of the few decks that I've shown you so far that I would actually use in my own kind of personal practice. So this is what it looks like inside. The Krishna it comes with this cute little booklet, and then we've got the cards here. So the backs are sort of perfect for a Krishna themed deck, and so she's done all of the art style herself, and the structure of this deck is she has sort of 3 different sections, and so all of these cards are actually little come from little stories from Krishna's life. So phase 1, when Krishna is in Gokul, and so this is like baby Krishna. This is a lot of stories from his early childhood, which I'm like very, very viscerally familiar with growing up as a Hare Krishna. And then phase 2 is when Krishna is in Mathura. So that's when Krishna sort of grows up into his role a little bit more. And the last phase is Krishna in Dwarka. So this is when, the events of the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita take place. So that's the more mature Krishna. So I like the way that this is a narrative oracle. And so I went ahead and numbered them. Otherwise, there's no way to, they're organized like chronologically by the stories they tell, and hard to find. So for each of them, she's done all of these drawings herself, and they're in a little bit of a sort of more traditional kind of village style illustrations, which are quite charming. And she's got a keyword, belief, and then she's got a little message. And then if you look in the guidebook, she'll talk about what the story is and then where the message is coming from. Make the right choice, new beginnings, help is on the way, let go of false ego, you have death, patience, ask for God's grace and help. One of the reasons I like this deck over a lot of the oracle decks that you have on sort of Hinduism that are sort of mass market and available in the West, they don't actually, I feel like they miss out on a lot of the stories and context, and they go right to giving you this kind of very sort of new aged up message without kind of giving you a lot of the cultural context. And so that's one of the reasons I do enjoy this one is I've heard a lot of these stories, and still some of them are new to me. Transformation. Time to move on. So it's, yeah. Here he is dancing on the Ananta Shesha, the giant serpent. So lots of cute little stories. So it's a very sweet deck. I think it would look lovely with some bright blue edges. Another thing I forgot to mention about this guy is, he would be very against anyone doing any kind of deck modification. Like he explicitly talks about how the card should be kept, and if there's any damage or cuts or marks or drawings on the card, you need to discard the deck and get a new one. So I just thought that was an interesting perspective going on. So that's the Krishna Consciousness guidance cards. Again, you can find all of these on Indian Amazon. And then one book that I was really stoked about, this is Tarot Remedies and Healing by Rachita Gupta. And so this is coming from a group of astrologers and Indian healers and spiritual folks from a school in Delhi that's called Future Point. And so they offer courses in astrology, vastu shastra, tarot, numerology, and palmistry. And they actually, if you speak Hindi, they're actually a really great resource on YouTube. They've got a whole channel. And so I've actually watched a lot of her tarot classes on YouTube, and she switches between Hindi and English. But if you're interested in learning more about how she's incorporating traditional Indian remedies, she's actually, I think this is like kind of the definitive book I've found that shows how to incorporate tarot into some of these traditional remedies that have to do with all of the things I've mentioned. So I was very stoked to get this. I'm trying to reach out and get an interview with her. So this is the first volume, is where she just goes through the regular meanings of the tarot. So I sort of skipped that one and went straight to this one. So she talks about reversals, direct reading directionality, and then she goes into the astrological associations of the tarot. And some readers I found who have learned tarot, who are completely self-taught, or have the way you learn tarot in India is usually like there's very few schools like she's coming from, and what you usually do is you find a reader and you take on sort of like you basically find a guru, a tarot guru, or just a reader who is willing to take on students and teach them. And so a lot of individual readers I'm talking to, they've also had to kind of develop syllabuses in order to teach people who approach them, and some will offer classes. And so that's how you go about learning tarot, for the most part, which I also have found to be quite interesting. But yeah, so because of that, you will have some readers who like really figure out. One of the readers I work with, she has all of her own attributions to the tarot. So like for all of the major cards, some of them are indicative of different astrological houses, of planets, of zodiacal signs. And from that, she uses that to diagnose like remedies in vastu shastra. She sees a really big connection there. And so there's ways she's just found to go about doing that. But in this book, the way she lays it out is it's all according to the Golden Dawn attributions, which a lot of us are sort of familiar with. And then she talks about some great stuff, destiny versus free will, types of karma. So this is all like really great material for my dissertation, which is great. I get stoked. Using gems. So gems are a little bit different than crystals. You can do like crystal healing is still a thing in India, but there's traditional like gems that you wear in rings and jewelry that have to do with like planetary stuff. So she gives the connections for that. She talks about Kal Purush Kundalini, or the 12 houses and the divinatory meaning. She talks about numerology, and numerology in India is a little bit different than other kinds of numerology. It has its own nuances. By and large, it's very similar, but you will find its own sort of idiosyncrasies. And then, talking through some more numerology stuff. Muhurta fixation. So Muhurta is the type of astrology that has to do with like finding auspicious moments in time. And so that's something that a lot of clients want. And so she's found a way to do that with tarot, which is really interesting. Remedies in tarot, gems and crystals. She also talks about chakra healing, mantras as remedies, Gomti chakra as remedies. She also mentions Kabbalah. So there's a lot of just really, I've been really interested to learn about how she's incorporating some very Indian remedies into the tarot. She also talked about yantras, which are quite fascinating. I'm getting really into yantras right now. Let's see if there's a... 250. Yantras are similar to, here's some, similar to mandalas, but yantras are basically, it's a kind of sacred geometry, but yantras are basically a container for different divine energies. So all of the planets, these are all the different planetary yantras, but you also have and each yantra will have an associated mantra that goes along with them. So if you're, for example, here we have the Shani mantra. So if you're having problems with Saturn, it might be recommended that you chant that specific mantra. Then there's the big Navgraha mantra. So that's all of the 9 planets. And Vedic astrology includes Rahu and Ketu as the extra 2. So lots of really interesting stuff going on here. So there's that, and then as a sort of contrast to this book, this is one woman's whereas this book, the meanings of the tarot are ones that Western readers would still be very familiar with, and she's just integrating tarot into traditional remedy systems. This book, Healing Guidance from Tarot Cards, you can see here what I talked about the nudity and offending Indian sensibilities. This book is of one woman's very idiosyncratic way of doing remedies. So she, at the beginning, she talks about, she had an experience where she was meditating and she was in conversation with the goddess of tarot, and also with Krishna, and she was sort of, in this sort of visitation, she was told to kind of write this book of remedies. And so for each of the cards in the tarot, she's got she's sort of channeled all of this. She did this work in 3 months. So for every card, there's a different sort of disease or a different affliction or a different thing that needs to be healed. And then there's a little bit of guidance for each of those cards. So all of this is her, it's very sort of idiosyncratic. Baldness and bone problems and lots of interesting things. So this is probably going to be a very long video, so apologies for that. I hope you've enjoyed my update. It's been a while coming, but I made it eventually, and I'm doing all right, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you all, and thanks for sticking around. Bye for now.